I'll tell you a little bit more about this guy. Right, as I say, you can come at it from both angles, so just come in and make your way round so everyone can see, and I will point him out for you. Right, so this little guy here, we don't know his actual name, so he's been given the name Samtek by an Egyptologist who came into the museum. He was about 3 years old when he died. He died 2,500 years ago, and he was born and lived in ancient Egypt. This little guy, obviously, has been mummified. He was bought in a bazaar, so in a market in Cairo in the 1920s. So he was just bought off a market stall in this coffin, and that's the lid. His body had been raided from a tomb and was then being sold to tourists on the open market. And it was bought by a woman called Lady Leeds, who was the daughter of Paris Singer of the Singer Sewing Machine Empire. They lived in Oldway Mansion just up the road. So this little guy was sitting in her living room on display for about 20 years. And then, yeah, well, that's why she gave it to us. Because, reputedly, towards the latter part of the 20 years she had him, footsteps were heard in the middle of the night. So she kept on getting woken up by footsteps. This obviously freaked her out a bit. So she handed him over to the museum, and he's been here for about 10 years now.
Why is there a chicken on top of it?
What, the top of the... It's just obviously it's 2,500 years old, so it's had some wear and tear. What else do you notice about the relationship between him and the coffin? He is indeed. He's quite a bit smaller, so we think that this was actually reused, and because in ancient Egyptian times, to raid someone else's burial site and to steal their coffin was absolutely sacrilegious, and you would be cursed. So they think that this was actually reused, so he would have been related to whoever originally owned the coffin. And about 5 years ago, we had an Egyptologist who came in. He's a specialist in coffins and sarcophagi. He looked at that and he said he thought that was a royal quality. So this little guy was from a really high social background. So as to when he died, or rather why he died, he was sent through CT scanner 2006, was it? 2006. Yeah. Sent through a CT scanner to try and determine why he died. So CT scanner will see, it will be able to see not only the bone inside your body but the soft tissue as well. And they were looking for trauma injuries or anything that had left a mark on the skeleton. There's quite a few diseases, like smallpox will leave a mark on the telltale mark on the skeleton. But they couldn't find anything, so they think he probably died of TB, which was prevalent at the time. So, on to mummy. Right, so I'm going to choose a victim, mummify. Dun, dun. Right, do we have a volunteer? It's alright, I won't actually do it.
Step forward, Darryl.
Right, so if you want to raise your left arm. Right, so the whole principle of mummifying someone or something, because there were loads of animals mummified as well, is, I won't make you keep your arm up for it. So the whole principle is to stabilise the body, so remove as much fluid from the body as possible, and as much soft tissue in order to dry out the body, which will stabilise it so you don't have bacteria munching the way through your body. So what we would do, was it Darryl?
Yeah.
Right, what we would do with Darryl when he's dead, which is reassuring, is we would make a massive incision down his chest cavity.
Gross.
And then we would take out all of his internal organs. So we'd take out his stomach,
Oh, lovely.
and we'd take out well, all of his intestines, his heart, his lungs, his liver, his kidneys. We take all of it out. So 8 grand. And then, what else do we need to remove as well?
Brain, yeah.
So how do we get his brain out?
From lose.
Through his nose. It's the best bit. So, I keep on forgetting to bring the tool down as well. So what we do with Daryl's nose, I'm trying not to blind you here, right, this little bit here, the end of your nose, because about the bottom 2/3 of your nose is made of cartilage. It's only the top bit, right at the top, is made of bone. So the bottom 2/3 is made of cartilage, which is why you can wobble your nose and why it's easy to break it. But this bit here, the septum, what you'd have to do to get the brains out your nose, you'd have to get a pair of pliers or the equivalent, just snap the septum off.
God, disgusting.
And then you get a corkscrew. It's like a thin corkscrew with a handle, about 18 inches long. And we'd get it and we'd smash it up Daryl's nose, smash through the base of his skull into the brain case, and then we'd mash up his brains and then just pull them all out through his nose. And that's how you get it, because otherwise you'd have to sort the top of his head and it'd make a real mess. You want to ruin his hair. So that's how you get the brains out. So ancient Egyptians didn't really think much of brains. It was the heart that they really revered and concentrated on. So the brains would be probably just chucked away. But the rest of his internal organs, they dry them out, and as you dry them out, the fluid reduces and they shrink in size. And they'd either put them in these little canopic jars, especially made, or, like with this guy, they wrapped them in resin-soaked bandages and strapped them to the inside of his thigh. And then they wrapped the whole of his body in resin-soaked bandages. But his body would have sat for about 40 days, because shortly after you die, you start to swell. And the gas is in you, expand, and you do pop. And it's quite stinky. So, after about 40 days, it would have been dried out enough to have been mummified. And then he would have been put in his coffin. So that's how they would have mummified them. We were actually offered a taxi driver that had been mummified from Torquay. That was about 4 years ago. I know, it was quite bizarre. So he was. He's probably still working on the seafront. So this guy obviously was a big fan of Egyptology, and he had a terminal illness, and he decided that he wanted to be mummified. So he donated his body to University of Oxford. They mummified him, and I saw the documentary on it, and it was disgusting. It really was. And then they offered him to us, but we just couldn't take him because you need a really specialist case, which is completely temperature controlled. I mean, this is pretty well controlled, but it's just fairly humidity control. But the case to be able to keep his body, because he'd only very recently been mummified, it would have cost an absolute fortune. So unfortunately, we couldn't take him. But this guy is pretty desiccated anyway, so he's all right. So anyway, on to right. So you will see. So if you rub it from the outside, the fingerprints don't go away if you're in the inside. You'll see bottom left-hand corner here. There's a crack, and that's where it was dropped. There's a lock at each corner, so you need to unlock each of those things. It takes 6 adults to lift it, because you can see the thickness of the case, and you need those glazers handles, those suction handles to get the thing off. Yeah, well this is it. And so when this was last opened 9 years ago, that was before I've been working here 9 years before I came, so it was just over 9 years ago. So